Hi, and welcome to the Dream Season podcast, an oral history of the 1989-90 UConn men's basketball season, also known as the Dream Season. This is episode 10, Grand Opening. A new week and a new era dawned the morning after UConn defeated Georgetown 70-65. Nadav Hennefeld became the first ever freshman to win Big East Player of the Week. In the wins over Syracuse and Georgetown, Hennefeld scored 32 points and also had 12 rebounds, 9 steals, and 7 assists. He shared the honor with Providence's Eric Murdoch. UConn students and fans were in a state of both hysteria and disbelief. The Huskies were 15-3, had won 5 straight Big East games, and were now in third place in the conference standings. With 12 games remaining on the schedule, a trip to the NCAA tournament seemed assured, barring a significant letdown. The Huskies hadn't been to the tournament since the 1979-80 season. Jim Calhoun was doing his best to avoid that possibility, holding a team meeting the day after the Georgetown game. Said Calhoun, quote, "We met today with the purpose of trying to put the thing in perspective. I told them they should be proud of themselves, but on the other side of the coin, the kids understand people will be looking at us a little more closely from now on. My job over the next couple of days is to let everybody else do the voting and all of that. Those things don't really mean anything to me. We've got to think about what we have to do over the next 12 games." End quote. The voting Calhoun referred to was the Associated Press Top 25 poll. On Monday afternoon, the results were in. The Huskies were ranked 20th by the country sports writers. Calhoun on being ranked, quote, "If we were to stay in the polls for any long period of time, to me, that's the only major benefit. If you stay in there, then every game you get mentioned more often. Instead of just being on the scrolling scores, they talk about you. We understand all the benefits, and for a program like ours, it certainly is a nice step." End quote. UConn was last ranked the previous season, when they were number 18 in early December. They only managed to stay there for 1 week, dropping out after losing to Purdue in their following game. The players seemed to have heeded Calhoun's advice and were focused on the larger picture. Said Chris Smith, quote, "Our goal is to go to the NCAA tournament, and we're going to be there this year." End quote. The Georgetown game was the final game of the season for UConn at the Hartford Civic Center. Up next for the Huskies was a matchup with Central Connecticut State on Wednesday, January 24th, which will be the final game ever at the Fieldhouse, followed by the grand opening of the new home of the Huskies, Gampel Pavilion, on Saturday the 27th versus 15th-ranked St. John's. The Fieldhouse hosted its first game on December 1st, 1954, a 116-77 UConn win over Rhode Island. The 116 points set a team record for most points scored in a game, which lasted for 2 years before being broken in 1956. The record as of the 2022-23 season is 130, set in 1993. When the Fieldhouse opened, it represented a major step up from the previous home court, the ROTC cage. According to UConn's all-time leading rebounder Art Quimby, the difference in the two facilities was, quote, "like walking into Madison Square Garden." The initial capacity of the cozy confines was 4,200, eventually growing to 4,604. Fans would be sitting so close to the baseline under the baskets that many players would trip over the feet of the spectators sitting in the front row. The Fieldhouse was the site of some of the most memorable games in UConn history. They include the Slowdown game from February 28, 1970, when head coach D. Rowe, down to only 5 usable players after the suspensions of leading scorer Bob Boyd and 2 others, employed a stall strategy, resulting in a 35-32 win over Rhode Island and a share of the Yankee Conference Championship. On January 10, 1968, UConn forward Bill Corley dropped 51 points in a 96-70 win over New Hampshire, breaking West Balastunia's record for most points scored in a game by 1 point. Corley's 51 is still the number to beat through the end of the 2022-23 season. There was the bomb scare game on February 15, 1971, when a bomb threat was received midway through the second half of a matchup with Holy Cross. After the Fieldhouse was evacuated and swept for explosive devices, the game resumed with no fans in the building, as the Crusaders won 103-78. Finally, in what is widely considered to be the most memorable game at the Fieldhouse, UConn defeated Virginia Commonwealth on March 25, 1988, 72-61, to advance to the NIT Final Four. The official attendance that night was 4,801, even though the capacity was 4,604. The temperature in the building was at least 80 degrees, and the crowd noise was so loud that dust was shaking from the rafters, which created an eerie haze throughout the facility. By 1990, the Fieldhouse had outlived its usefulness as a home court option for UConn. The Big East had mandated that it was too small to host conference games after the 1985-86 season. In addition, the roof leaked, and several different sports used the facility daily for practice and games. former head coach Don Perno, quote, "Because the track team was often running around the bleachers, we would hear a starter's gun go off. Well, Mike McKay hears it and he hits the deck. I said, Michael, don't worry, they won't be shooting at you. They'll be shooting at me." End quote. The final opponent to visit the Fieldhouse, the Central Connecticut State University Blue Devils, didn't seem to pose much of a threat. Central, which had been hit hard by injuries, entered the game with a record of 3-12 on the season. The Blue Devils were left with little depth and started 3 freshmen. One of the upperclassmen that started for Central was 6'6" forward Patrick Sellers, the older brother of the Huskies' Rod Sellers. There was some sad news for the Huskies. Murray Williams' father, Vance Williams, passed away unexpectedly, and Murray would be away from the team for the rest of the week. Lyman DePriest would take Murray's place in the starting lineup. Here's UConn radio play-by-play man Bob Usler to set the stage for the game.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to University of Connecticut basketball on the Connecticut Radio Network. Tonight, for the final time, we speak to you live from the Storrs Fieldhouse on the campus of the University of Connecticut as the Central Connecticut Blue Devils visit the UConn Huskies. And hi again, everybody. Bob Usler, Wayne Norman, and Turner Gill speaking to you from a facility which they say its time has come. They say it's time to leave the field house, and tonight the Huskies will do just that. They'll play their final varsity basketball game ever here tonight against Central. And then on Saturday night, they'll open up a new era in UConn athletic history when they open the Gampel Pavilion this Saturday night versus St. John's. But first things first, and that is Central Connecticut and UConn this evening. And the Huskies, of course, in the news recently. They are now a member of the top 20 in college basketball, at least according to the Associated Press. They are 20th ranked in the nation. The United Press poll has the Huskies at 19th, and the CNN USA Today poll has UConn checking in at number 21. And the Huskies causing all kinds of excitement following their 5-point victory last Saturday night at the Civic Center over Georgetown to improve their record to 15-3 overall, and they are now in third place of the Big East Conference with a league record of 5-2. Tough year for the Central Connecticut Blue Devils. They are 3-12 overall, and they are sporting a very young team, a team which has 3 freshmen in the starting lineup.
Rod won the opening tip over brother Patrick, and the Huskies were off and running. They jumped out to a 16-4 start. During that run, the Dove Hennefeld entered the history books.
Swan looking inbound, gives it to Hennefeld, who has his first steal of the night, drives up the court and lays it in. And Hennefeld has now tied Bobby Doolin for the single-season record at UConn for most steals. And Hennefeld with a second steal and a beautiful pass to George, who lays it in. So Hennefeld with the steal in the basket, and there was the steal and the assist. It makes the score Connecticut 13, Central 2, and Mike Brown wants timeout for the Blue Devils.
There was another notable moment for UConn early in the first half. For the first time in 5 games, Scott Burrell returned to the court.
He was fouled by Lyman DePriest, who has 2 now, and the hand you hear in the background is for the appearance of Scott Burrell. Scott Burrell in the UConn lineup. He hurt his knee on December 30th in a game against St. Joseph's. He had it surgically repaired on January 8th, arthroscopic surgery. He missed 5 straight games, all 5 of them UConn victories, as they went on that tear through the Big East. And here's Scott Burrell back on the floor for the first time since late December.
After UConn jumped out to that early lead, Central, thanks to the full court press and some sharp shooting from the foul line, fought back. With 5:10 left in the half, the Huskies led by only 2 points, 31-29. But UConn responded and closed out the first half on a 16-2 run to take a 47-33 lead into the locker room. After what was certainly a fiery halftime speech by Coach Calhoun, UConn started the second half on a 21-8 run. They eventually led by as many as 31 points in the second half, cruising to a 96-77 victory. As you might imagine, Calhoun was not happy with their performance. Quote, "If we're going to win in the Big East, one thing we can't do is go down a level in intensity. That's the thing that concerns me. It wasn't the moments when we weren't playing well. It was the moments when we weren't focused. Those things are indicative of playing the scoreboard instead of playing the game. We were fortunate enough that we could outman them. We certainly didn't outplay them." End quote. The backcourt led the way in scoring for the Huskies. Chris Smith had 19, including 5 three-pointers, while Tate George had 16. Hennefeld had 13 points and 4 steals, while Rod Sellers had 14 points and 6 rebounds. Rod won the battle over his brother Patrick, as Patrick managed just 1 point, but did grab 8 boards. Rod recalls what it was like playing against his brother.
I could never beat my brother one-on-one until I was 19 years old. We would play games, and a game to 11 by 1 would take an hour. It'd be a bloodbath. He wasn't the most skilled guy either, but I just couldn't beat him. And then, I'm playing against him in college, and this is my brother. He's my big brother. I wanted him so bad to do well. I want to beat him bad, but I want him personally to do well. And then, we just beat them, and he looked like he was a little nervous out there playing against us. Or, his coach basically had him in the lineman to priest defensive only position where he couldn't shoot. And I'm like, man, shoot the ball. So it was weird because I wanted him to do well, but I wanted to beat him, but I always wanted him to do well, and then even the 3 years that we played against each other, I always wanted him to do well. And he just wouldn't shoot the ball, man. And my teammates are like, because all my teammates knew him because we would all hang out together. They were like, Pat, man, shoot. He just wouldn't shoot, So, but it was weird, You got a little bragging rights if you want to, but that's my big brother, man. Like he was almost like a dad to me after my dad passed. So, like I just always wanted him to do well.
With a victory over Central, the curtain officially closed on the Fieldhouse. Over the past 35 years, the Fieldhouse hosted 367 games, with UConn winning 282 of them, for a winning percentage of 77%. Here's UConn's former longtime Senior Associate Director of Athletic Communications, Mike Enright, on the legacy of the Fieldhouse and how its closing has been relegated to an historical footnote.
Yeah, I think people forget it was, there's so many storylines to this dream season. It was also the year of 3 home courts. And thankfully, and I think I don't feel bad, but I think the closing of the Fieldhouse got lost in the whole thing and got lost in the memories of the season, and it's understandable. But I think that night deserves its due in the work you're doing. We brought back it was against the Connecticut team. We brought back the first team that played in the Fieldhouse. I think Art Quimby was there. I think Hugh Greer's wife, Billy, was back. It was just a great night. And we had reception beforehand and afterwards. And it's so that night kind of gets lost in the memories. And that's fine. There were a lot of memories to make, but pretty unique in college basketball or in any athletic facility. Usually the closing of a building comes at the end of the season, and the opening of a building comes the next season. But in the span of, what would it have been? So in the span of 4 days, we closed a great facility and we opened even a greater facility. And we closed the old facility against a regional opponent, and we opened the new facility against a national opponent. So it was kind of poetic how things worked out. But the closing of the UConn Fieldhouse, Storrs Fieldhouse, should not be forgotten. And what a great night it was.
In 1991, the UConn Board of Trustees would officially rename the Fieldhouse the Hugh S. Greer Fieldhouse in honor of former head basketball coach Hugh Greer. Greer was head coach from 1946 to 1963, when he tragically died of a heart attack at 58 years old. During Greer's 17 seasons as head coach, UConn won the Yankee Conference 13 times, including 10 straight from the 1950-51 season through the 1959-60 season. He won 287 games, which is second only to Jim Calhoun in the UConn record books. Now that both the closing of the Fieldhouse and another non-conference opponent were in the rearview mirror, the Huskies' focus turned to their next task, the opening of their new home, the 8,122-seat Harry A. Gampel Pavilion, and more importantly, at least to Jim Calhoun, number 15 St. John's, who was the last team to have beaten UConn. The opening of the new on-campus athletic facility had been a long time coming. First proposed to the UConn Board of Trustees in 1968, the plans had been discussed and delayed several times over the ensuing 21 years. The first plans called for a facility to be ready for the 1974-75 season at a cost of $5.3 million, but was rejected by the state. The cost increased to $14.1 million in 1981 and to $21.6 million in 1985. The final cost was $28.5 million, with $23 million being provided by the state of Connecticut, with the remaining $5.5 million coming from private donations. UConn had to prove to the Connecticut General Assembly that it could raise the $5.5 million before they would approve their $23 million. Fundraising efforts were boosted when UConn received a $1 million donation from 1943 School of Business graduate Harry A. Gampel, in what was at the time the largest individual gift ever received by the university. UConn ended up raising close to $7 million in total for the project from private donors. In addition, UConn students donated $900,000, thanks to a $20 surcharge on their fees over 3 years, and the UConn Alumni Association also donated $500,000. As a result, the basketball court would be named Alumni Court in honor of those donations. There was also a game to be played on that Alumni Court, and the Huskies looked to atone for their 31-point defeat at the hands of St. John's on January 2nd. That was also the last time UConn had lost. St. John's entered the game in first place in the Big East and was riding a 4-game winning streak. UConn countered with a 6-game winning streak of their own, including a school record 5 straight Big East games. Mike Gorman and Ron Perry had the call for the Big East Television Network.
History will be made tonight here in Storrs, Connecticut, as the doors for the Harry A. Gampel Pavilion are open for the first time, and there will be a basketball game played here tonight in this beautiful new facility that holds better than 8,500. And what a basketball game it's turned out to be. The University of Connecticut Huskies and the St. John's Redmen are set to go at it, both teams nationally ranked, and we should have a great Saturday night coming up at Big East basketball. I'm Mike Gorman, along with Ron Perry. Welcome to what should be a great game, and I'm sure it's going to be a better game than the first time around when St. John's just crushed the Huskies down at Alumni Hall.
St. John's Robert Wardan scored the first points in Gampel history. The first UConn points?
Inside, Sellers has got 2.
Well, Sellers really showed himself that time. Give me the ball, and he got great position, knew what to do with it.
St. John's jumped out to a 10-4 lead when the Huskies started to shake off the nerves and excitement of opening their new home.
He's got a slender build, does Sealy, but knows how to get in there and use that body.
Sellers, the quick hands in the steal. Up it comes to Smith. Spins away from Buchanan.
Good look.
Finds Burrell. Got it for foul.
Jim Calhoun had to like that one because what his team has done this year has generated a lot of great plays off of good defense, and this is off the Sellers steal. And Chris Smith, where he's so tough in the open court, puts the brakes on in time, and then it's Burrell able to finish.
That sequence kicked off a 12-3 UConn run, which gave the Huskies their first lead of the game, 16-13. The lead changed hands 5 more times over the next 5+ minutes. With just over 2 minutes left in the first half and down 32-27, the Huskies gave the Gampel crowd a reason to really express themselves.
In traffic, lost it. Hennefeld is the one who got a hand in there.
UConn's got to look to push here. The half court's been tough for them.
George underneath Cerulik. Out to Smith. Wants a 3.
He's got the 3. He's got the range going. Chris Smith, boy, does he get up off his feet for the jump shot.
32-30. Under 2 minutes to go first half. And the crowd is right back into this game.
One more of those and they're just going to lose it here.
Minute 25 first half. Harvey's
nice
lean or no. Underneath Cerulik. Up to Smith. He's had the hot hand. Alley-oop.
That's what they were waiting for here at Gampel Pavilion. Alley-oop time.
And they are on their feet.
After a Malik Sealy dunk put St. John's back on top 34-32, UConn looked to take the last shot of the half.
Smith fakes the 3. Checks the clock out.
Hold for the last one and put it up with about 5 seconds and bang the backboards.
Hennefeld out to throw a screen. John Gwynn. Rebound to Smith. He's got time. Got it at the buzzer.
Oh, Chris Smith. What a hot hand he's had riding it in, putting the Huskies up by a point, Mike.
15 for Smith in the first half. And they like their new building here.
The Huskies took all of the momentum and a 35-34 lead into the locker room. Chris Smith and Scott Burrell scored 25 of the Huskies' 35 points in the first half. Malik Sealy led St. John's with 12. The second half started slow, with both teams struggling to score for the first 5 or so minutes of the half. The lead seesawed back and forth. With the Johnnies up 40-39, UConn's defense came through once again.
Steal at half court. Burrell saves it. Hennefeld's got it.
Oh, good look.
Spots Gwynn.
Now there's Hennefeld, 2 plays in a row, really creating those opportunities for the Huskies.
Connecticut goes back on top by 1.
While Smith and Burrell led the Huskies in the first half, they would be led by 2 others in the second half, John Gwynn and Dan Cerulik.
Tied at 43. George, a little room. Cerulik, another rebound. A tough follow. Goes down.
Oh, when you've got it going, you've got it going.
They may change this to the Cerulik Center before long. Jason Williams bumps his way in, gets it back. Tipped away. Cerulik, a great play.
What hustle with the left hand, he tips it back.
Gwen again comes up shooting.
Danny Cerulik, give him credit there for the possession.
Huskies by 2 halfway through the second half. There's Seeley, little open jumper, won't go down. Scrolling big on the boards. Jason Williams there. Seeley, another follow.
Oh, it's a war in there right now.
Singleton tries. Rebound to Priest. Outlet to Burrell. Bounce pass Gwynn. He wants it. He got it. The foul.
Oh! Huskies with the bounce.
The Priest, who does a great job battling underneath. Now Smith will reset. They've got a fresh 45. We're about to go under 7 minutes.
Oh, we got a tug-of-war going right now. Both teams just trading hoops in this second half. Got to hold a couple of times to pull ahead in this game.
Cerulik hits again.
Unconscious. No hesitation, just a quick turnaround jumper. And Dan Cerulik has showed us some 2 or 3 jumpers, the jump hook, the fadeaway, playing with all kinds of emotion.
Cerulik's jumper put the Huskies up 53-51 with 6:45 left in the game. The next 2 minutes effectively ended the game.
NFL the fall away. Hits on the baseline.
There he goes. He needed that one to get himself going.
First basket of the night puts the Huskies up 4. And the building is back in it again. Not that they've ever really been out of it. They just take it to new levels on these little runs.
It doesn't take much either to get them just ready to erupt here at Gampel Pavilion.
NFL the steal. Finds Gwen on the break. Gwen got it.
Oh, a beautiful run-up by Gwynn. Once again found by Hennefeld off the steal.
Gwen with 11, 9 in the second half. Hennefeld now the NCAA record holder. 6-point Connecticut lead. Might be their biggest lead of the night.
Johns really needs one right now.
Seeley nearly traveled. Scrolling. Cerulik a rebound.
Oh, he's come up huge in this second half.
John Gwen, he's able to launch it. Finds Hennefeld for 3. Tipped up and in by Gwen.
Oh, my! Can you believe it? Got that one with his left hand at 5'11".
And St. John's just called their final timeout. 59-51 for Connecticut. They love it here.
With 2 minutes and 10 seconds remaining, St. John's cut the lead to 61-54 after a Boo Harvey three-pointer. Lou Carnesecca immediately called timeout, but St. John's had called their final timeout 2 minutes earlier. Chris Smith then made both technical free throws, and the Huskies continued to make free throws down the stretch. The final score, UConn 72, St. John's 58. Thanks to Georgetown losing earlier in the day to Syracuse, the win over St. John's moved UConn into a tie for first place with the team they had just defeated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Giants winning the UConn Huskies are now in first place in the Big
Chris Smith led the Huskies with 20 points, but the story of the game was the UConn bench. John Gwynn and Dan Cerulik each had 13 points, with Cerulik adding 10 rebounds. Scott Burrell continued to ease back into playing conditions, adding another 12 points off the bench. It was a magical night for the UConn men's basketball program, They equaled their best ever start to a Big East season at 6-2, which was set in the 1981-82 season. They avenged a 31-point loss to St. John's 3 weeks earlier, and they christened their new home. There are a lot of memories that stem from that memorable Saturday night. This was the night that Chris Smith had a feeling that this team was pretty special.
When the Gampel opened up, when we played St. John's the next time, we played St. John's the next time. It was a huge game. It was the first game at the Gampel Pavilion. The fans was there from school. Everybody was going crazy. It was a TV game, and we won that game. We beat a team that beat us by, like you said, 30 points the last time, and we knew it.
Longtime Connecticut news anchor Jerry Brooks recalls a design flaw with the new building.
My immediate impression, aside from the fact of, what a nice facility, was it's too small. They didn't build it big enough. They what was the capacity was just 9, I think. And, I'm looking around going, they could put twice as many people in here. And you're going to have some down years, and you're not going to sell out every game in those down years. But, typical Connecticut, you had to keep everybody happy at the time. And Hartford wanted games, and New Haven wanted games, and Bridgeport wanted games. So they sacrificed what could have been something a little bit bigger, if not better, at UConn on campus. But what a great addition.
UConn radio play-by-play broadcaster Bob Usler remembers the noise.
Matt, I can't do justice to the noise level in Gampel Pavilion that night. I remember Wayne Norman explaining what Kevlar was. Kevlar is that the material in the ceiling. And only Wayne could do some justice to something like that. He actually gave a description and the effect it would have on the noise or the absorption of noise, whatever the heck it was. It was loud. It was really, really loud. I mean, loud to the point where you have the headphone level up and still you have trouble hearing yourself. It was that kind of an atmosphere. And that same St. John's team, which had embarrassed UConn down at alumni, it's Carnesecca Arena now, in Jamaica, Queens, now comes up to Storrs, Connecticut, the inaugural game at Gampel Pavilion, and UConn just ran them off the floor. I remember seeing the shots there. Michelle shocked Louis in one of those ugly sweaters, and they had no chance in that game. And it was a night to remember in a season where there were many nights like that.
Here's Mike Enright again.
It's like opening night. I mean, I've never run a theater or anything like that, but it was the debut night, and against St. John's, Lou Carnesecca, it was the perfect storm. It was the team was off to this incredible start. Everybody knew about it. The students were excited. We had all walked through Gampel Pavilion numerous times during the construction process. You never thought it was going to get done. You wondered as we were building it, would the people come? Could we get the building to be 3/4 full on opening night? And it turned out perfect. I mean, there were lots of little glitches along the way. I remember, working with Tim on little details that no one even knew about or really cares about now. But how do we get the sodas iced down? How do we run the press conferences? I think there was we got to do the players press conference somewhere. We had a media room set up that was with the size of the Connecticut media contingent, especially at that time, was woefully built too small. But again, just a real exciting night. I remember being courtside with I sat next to Tim and Phil Shardas, who was running for the Manchester JI and is now the men's basketball SID. And I think it came from Phil. Like, we finally made it. We're here, and the place was going nuts, and it was just this real. And again, kind of an innocent moment because it was pre-social media, pre-internet. You were either there or you weren't, and we were all there. It was terrific.
Former Norwich Bulletin UConn beat reporter Pete Abraham, who now covers the Boston Red Sox for the Boston Globe.
Yeah, well, I remember, Gampel was almost like a spaceship landed because it was so different from the rest of the campus, and and they had been playing in the field house, which was probably pretty much what it looked like in the 50s, and their locker room looked like something out of, an old comic strip or something, like nails on a piece of wood, hung your sneakers up there. And then, we saw Gampel coming up, and they would take us through tours of it and everything. And I remember, being, one day, you couldn't find a place to park because they had already done something else. And when we walked in there for the first game, like it smelled antiseptic, like it smelled new. And it was like, wow, look at this, and I remember walking around the ring above the court, and Coach Rowe was there, and he had done a lot of the work to raise the money to build the arena. And I said, Coach, this is, unbelievable, huh? And he said, can you believe this is at the University of Connecticut? And I said, no, really, I can't. And they had a special program, and they had special T-shirts, they, all of these things that they had never done before. And it was, that was like sort of coincidental to the whole thing. Like, they weren't planning on being great the year they opened the gym, but it worked out that way. And the other thing I remember is they used to have in the field house, the assistant coaches didn't have offices. They had like desks in a hallway. So if I wanted to talk to Howie or Dave Lato, I would just walk down this hallway and be like, hey, Howie, how you doing? And then in Gampel, they had offices, which was like, wow, look at this. Like Howie's got his own office, like, which seems crazy now because, every college assistant coach has an office, And I remember like, back then, we had full access. I used to be able to come in anytime I wanted, sit down and talk to the coaches, all that kind of stuff. And I remember like being really impressed that like, well, look at UConn, like Howie's got his own office and Dave's got his own office. And, the grad assistant's got an office. Like, this is crazy. And it was just sort of like, it always felt like UConn was like trying to piece it together, with coupons almost. But then they get this gym, and it's like, well, look at us. We're just as good as anybody else, And it was kind of, I know the players took a lot out of that, like we got to live up to this. Like look what they've done. And like, we got to be, like we kind of, I don't know about like owe it to them, but like you could tell the players were inspired by having that place for sure.
Finally, UConn assistant coach Dave Lato, followed by Jim Calhoun, reflect on the impact that the opening of Gampel had on the program.
So in recruiting, you sell what is, or you sell what can be. And Gampel was always something that could be. Here are the plans. We walk through a construction site. This is a floor we're going to play on, but never saying, this is our team on the floor participating in a really good arena. So the anticipation of doing that became a reality. And, that night, was obviously magical to be able to have, especially in the middle of a season. That doesn't happen quite often when you open up a new building. But, for us as coaches, it became more tangible to be able to speak to in a recruiting from a recruiting standpoint, or just the act of being on the floor. Here we are. This is who we are. And at the time, being able to sell it as one of the best buildings, not just in the East, but in America. So it did so much for the arrival of UConn basketball, because now you have something that you don't have to sell as abstract, but you have something that's very tangible.
I don't know what electricity looks like, but it was there. And you could feel it all over the place. People who felt fortunate enough to be at that game were going to root like people who were fortunate enough for that game. And the feeling in Robert Wardam and Malik Sealy and that really, really good St. John's team. Game went back and forth, and then we just took off and won. And I just think that that was one of the more special moments. You have special moments in your career. And I think that to some degree has made, Gampel Pavilion an incredible place for people to come into. And for a lot of years, you look at the records there. I mean, we were pretty good there. And a welcoming home is incredible to have, and one you're proud of, by the way. Other teams would come into the building, start looking at all the things we had, and it was special, yeah.
When the latest Associated Press Top 25 poll was released on Monday, UConn was ranked 13th, their highest ever ranking. They had won 7 games in a row, were 17-3, 6-2 in the Big East, and thanks to Syracuse defeating St. John's later that Monday, all alone in first place in the Big East. Jim Calhoun was happy with the higher ranking, but also continued to keep things in perspective. Said Calhoun, quote, "We've played basketball here for 90 years, and I think that's nice. We don't want to live on it, we want to build on it. I'm not thinking about being 8th or anything in the preseason. I'm just thinking about winning basketball games. But there's nothing wrong with getting some recognition for what the kids have done. From a very selfish standpoint, what it does is make the people on the NCAA selection committee well aware of who we are. They weren't last year, and even if we had 17 wins last year, someone would have had to make a case for us. This year, I think the case has been made." End quote. The Huskies hit the road for their next game, a non-conference matchup at the Curry-Hicks Cage in Amherst, Massachusetts, against UMass. UMass was 10-7 on the season, but had lost their previous 4 games. They were led by sophomore guard Jim McCoy, who was averaging 21 points per game, and coached by John Calipari, who was in his second year at the helm of the Minutemen. The Huskies continued with the same lineup from the previous 2 games of Rod Sellers, Lyman DePriest, Nadav Hennefeld, Chris Smith, and Tate George. The UConn bench was bolstered by the return of Murray Williams to the team. Here's WTNH's Ken Strayhorn with a recap of the game.
It was UConn against UMass, but the atmosphere was Big East. The fans of the Minutemen wanted desperately to stop the 13th-ranked Huskies. Pressing and running, Chris Smith hit an early 3, 7-4 Huskies. Massachusetts battled extremely hard. This is Chris Herrer on the drive. With 8:50 remaining in the first half, UMass took a 16-15 lead. Once again, it was Herrer. In their last home game here at the Cage, UMass had about 1,000 fans. Tonight, the house was overflowing, and in the first half, at least, that helped spur the Minutemen. Used to dealing with pressure, back came UConn. Chris Smith hits 26-25 Huskies. Then Scott Burrell spotted up for 3, 33-29 UConn. It forced a UMass timeout. Connecticut went on to lead 37-33 at the break.
They made it very tough for us, but not as painful as it could have been. Because I really think the environment was set up for us to slip a little bit and for UMass to take advantage. They did take advantage, but I think we responded with some good offense.
The second half belonged to the Huskies. Rod Sellers on the jam, 41-55, UConn by 14. Later in the game, when John Gwynn hit the jumper, the count went to 66-49, Huskies by 17.
I'm not happy with the way we played. I'm satisfied with the win. I'm satisfied with the fact that, you know, as you call the tween game, which it really is, between tough basketball games, I mean, I would have to say that I would grade us from a character standpoint, poise standpoint. I mean, with 6 minutes to go, you knew we were going to win.
Down the stretch, UConn put away their 18th win of the season. Hennefeld on the bomb, and the final was 94-75 Huskies. In Amherst, Ken Strayhorn, Action News 8.
The Huskies led 37-33 at halftime and came out strong in the second half. The lead grew to as many as 16 points before UMass climbed back to within 8 at 83-75 with 3:51 left. The Minutemen would not score another point, and the final score was UConn 94, UMass 75. The Huskies shot a season-high 59% from the floor, including 67.7% in the second half. The steel curtain was also a factor, forcing 18 UMass turnovers, including 13 steals. Chris Smith led UConn with 22 points, Tate George had 16 points and 12 assists, and Scott Burrell continued to round back into form, finishing with 14 points. Jim Calhoun was happy with the win. Quote, "It was kind of nice having the fans rooting against us because we haven't had that in a while. We basically had some home cooking. We just had enough poise. I thought we did a good job at the end. It was not an easy win. We're just going to escape from the town the back way as fast as we can go." End quote. When Husky fans went to their mailbox on Thursday, February 1st, they were greeted by Joe Montana on the cover of the most recent issue of Sports Illustrated. The 49ers had defeated the Denver Broncos 55-10 in Super Bowl 24, but most Connecticut subscribers jumped ahead to page 38. There they were greeted by a picture of Dan Cerulik defending J.C. Buchanan of St. John's under the headline, "Mush You Huskies." Alexander Wolf's story was about the depth of the Big East and included several paragraphs on the upstart Huskies. In my admittedly unscientific assumption, this was by far the most exposure that the University of Connecticut has received in the pages of SI up until this point. Just a reminder, these were the days before instant sports news via the internet, and Sports Illustrated was essential reading. SI had over 3.5 million subscribers in 1990. This was a big deal. UConn finished the January portion of their schedule winning 8 of 9 games. The 18-3 Huskies would put their 8-game winning streak on the line on Saturday, February 3rd in a road matchup at Providence. Providence had won 7 of the last 8 regular season meetings against UConn, and the Huskies hadn't won at Providence since 1984. The Friars entered the game 12-6 overall and 5-4 in the Big East. They were led by guards Carlton Screen and Eric Murdoch, along with forward Marty Conlon. Each was averaging nearly 15 points per game. Murray Williams moved back into the starting lineup, replacing Lyman DePriest. The game started as a typical Big East slugfest. For the first 8 minutes, both teams traded baskets and fouls. With 12-13 left in the first half, and Providence leading 14-13, UConn embarked on a 29-7 run, from which the Friars never recovered.
Turner nearly threw it away and did. Chris Smith for 2.
Chris Smith can really get up, and again, it's the Connecticut defense turning it into good offense.
14-point Husky lead.
The Huskies' largest lead of the first half was 21 at the 3:25 mark at 42-21. The halftime margin was 46-28. UConn scored 17 points off of 12 PC turnovers in the half. The Friars also lost their cool, committing 3 technical fouls in the first half and sending the Huskies to the line 21 times. The second half was more of the same.
Hennefeld has it flipped away, but it came right to Smith. Leans again, gets his own rebound. Well, that's the story of the night.
Good hustle by Connecticut's Chris Smith that time.
Hennefeld a near steal. John Gwynn threw it up, had to. Burton saves it in the corner, and Burrell and Murdoch square off.
Well, you mentioned this in the first half. We've had a number of very physical plays in this game, and that eventually we could get a couple of players a little on edge. Saw it right there.
Let's take another look.
Well, this is one of the best defensive series for Providence of the game, with a couple of blocks and a little too much body here. Murdoch doesn't like it with Burrell, and a square off. Joe Mingle right in there. Good job by the officials.
Well, the Friars are doing a lot of woofing, but they're also doing a lot of standing around.
Providence had cut a 21-point second-half deficit to 13 with 4:19 left in the game, when Eric Murdoch was assessed PC's 4th technical foul of the game.
Rick Barnes looking to rally his Providence Friars for a last-ditch run at this game. They've got the ball down 13. Stranger things obviously have happened with 4:19 to go.
That's right, with the press that they can apply and the fact that they could take some three-point shots. And we got a tee here coming out of the timeout. Some pushing going on. You can see Quentin Burton stating his case.
And a technical foul has indeed been called. Yes, it is on Eric Murdoch, and we'll pass on what happened, but let's just say Eric Murdoch with an unsportsmanlike gesture.
Murdoch had spit at Tate George coming out of the timeout, but George didn't take the bait. Said Tate, quote, "He tried to spit at me, but he missed. If he had hit me, there probably would have been a brawl. I was going to retaliate, but I feel it's better for me to be here with the team instead of sitting out one game for fighting." End quote. The Huskies hit 24 of 30 free throws in the second half to finish off the Friars, 92-77. The 92 points were the most ever scored by a UConn team in Big East play. The winning streak was now 9 consecutive games overall and 7 consecutive in conference play. The Huskies kept pace with Georgetown for first place in the Big East at 7-2. The 7 Big East wins equals the most for the Huskies since the 1981-82 season, when UConn finished 7-7 in the conference. 5 Huskies scored in double figures, led by Chris Smith's 21 points. John Gwynn had 15 coming off the bench, while George and Hennefeld had 13 apiece. Rod Sellers added 12 points and 8 rebounds. Jim Calhoun was once again pleased with the team. Quote, "Maybe we're not just a team on a roll. Maybe we're a lot better than people thought, even myself. Sure, we're on a roll, but we're also pretty damn good." End quote. With the Huskies notching 2 more wins, more Big East and national honors arrived after the week had ended. Nadav Hennefeld was honored as the Big East Rookie of the Week for the second time, after posting 23 points and 13 rebounds in wins over UMass and PC. And when the Associated Press released their latest top 25 poll on Monday evening, UConn jumped 5 spots and were now in the top 10 for the first time in school history, at number 8. Once again, Jim Calhoun and the players tried to stay grounded in reality. Calhoun, "It's very nice. We'll take everything we can for our program. To be a top 10 team this late in the season is a nice tribute to our kids. But I didn't pick us 8th in the Big East in the preseason, and I didn't pick us 8th now either." Chris Smith, "It doesn't really matter where you're ranked in February." Steve Peichel, "I kind of wish it was an NCAA tournament invitation in writing. We haven't gotten anything yet, but it's nice to be mentioned in any polls. It's a big jump from when we were 9-19 3 years ago, and we weren't mentioned in anything." UConn would look to extend their winning streak to 10 games in their final non-conference game of the season on Tuesday, February 6th, against Fairfield at Gampel Pavilion. The Stags entered the game with a record of 7-11, but were one of the top defensive teams in the country, holding their opponents to 60.6 points per game. This was a game of two halves. UConn started the game stagnant and ice cold from the floor. Fairfield jumped out to an 11-4 lead to start the game. UConn's defense forced 13 first-half turnovers, but struggled to score, shooting 36.4% from the field. The Huskies managed only 28 first-half points, their fewest since their awful first half in the loss at home to Villanova in December. Fairfield managed to shoot 52.6% for the half, but still trailed UConn 28-23 at halftime. The assuredly fiery halftime speech from Coach Calhoun seemed to do the trick. Fairfield had possession to start the second half, and UConn forced a 5-second violation on the Stags as they attempted to inbound the ball. A basket by Fairfield's Ed Duncan at the 17:27 mark of the first half cut the UConn lead to 11 at 36-25. That would be the last Fairfield field goal until there was 9:10 remaining in the game. After Duncan's hoop, the Huskies immediately pushed the lead up to 21 points at 47-26 and would never trail by less than 20 the rest of the way. The final score was UConn 74, Fairfield 39. UConn had now won 10 consecutive games and had reached the 20-win mark during the regular season for the first time since the 1964-65 season. Nadav Hannafeld continued his strong play, posting a line of 18 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. The Steel Curtain defense accumulated 15 more steals while forcing 24 Fairfield turnovers. The Stags were 5 for 20 from the field in the second half and shot 38% for the game. Tate George added 13 points and Chris Smith 10 for the Huskies. Freshman forward Terreno Walker logged a season-high 16 minutes, a direct result of his increased effort in practice. Assistant coach Howie Dickerman, quote, "He's increased his intensity and concentration in practice. He showed flashes in October, but not as much as he has in the last week and a half. You can sense he wants to play more," end quote. Steve Peichel saw his first action since the January 9th matchup at Villanova, scoring 3 points. He had been sidelined with an injured right shoulder. UConn's schedule was about to become much more challenging, with a trip to the Carrier Dome to face number 6 Syracuse. Coming up on the next episode of the Dream Season podcast, the Huskies close out the regular season, hoping to stay among the leaders at the top of the Big East standings. Stick around after the credits to hear the pregame ceremonies from the final game at the Fieldhouse, where the 1954-55 UConn team, the first team to play in the building, was introduced, as well as an interview with Art Quimby. The Dream Season podcast is researched, written, and produced by me, Matt Edwards. Written sources for this episode are the Hartford Courant Archives and the Norwich Bulletin. Audio content is from YouTube. You can connect with the show via Twitter and Instagram at Dream Season Pod. If you have any memories to share about anything I just mentioned, want to correct me on something I screwed up, or just have general feedback to give, send me an email at dreamseasonpod@gmail.com or call and leave me a message at 903-884-8990. After I'm done with the regular episodes of the show, I'd love to have at least one episode that consists entirely of your memories of the Dream Season. Either leave a message at that above number or email me with an audio recording of your recollections, along with your name and location, and I will include them in that episode. As always, thank you so much for listening and for your patience.
Underway on the opposite side of the court, ceremonies honoring a lot of infamous UConn basketball players. In fact, they're honoring several head coaches who have been here in the past at the Fieldhouse, and at this time we'll pick up public address announcer Roger Baker.
Athletics Todd Turner. The head basketball coach at Connecticut from 1967 to 1969, Burr Carlson. The head basketball coach at Connecticut from 1969 to 1977, D. Rowe. Head coach of basketball at Connecticut from 1977 to 1986, Dom Perno. And in his 4th year as the current head coach of Connecticut basketball, Jim Calhoun.
This is Coach Jim Calhoun. You're listening to UConn basketball on Connecticut's only all-news station, WPOP, Hartford.
Here tonight. On the occasion of the final game in the Fieldhouse, the University of Connecticut and its Division of Athletics are proud to welcome back to the Storrs campus members of the 1954-55 UConn basketball team, the squad which launched the Fieldhouse era on December 1st, 1954, beating arch rival Rhode Island 116-77. Ladies and gentlemen, let's meet and greet your 1954-55 University of Connecticut Huskies. Sophomore from New London, Connecticut, number 16, Donnie Burns. A sophomore from Baldwin, Long Island, number 24, Bob Malone. Sophomore from Floral Park, Long Island, number 13, Dick Kiernan. A sophomore from New Haven, Connecticut, number 11, Bobby Osborne. A sophomore from Greenfield, Massachusetts, number 22, Fran Quinn. Junior from Worcester, Massachusetts, number 10, Bob Doobie. A junior from Braintree, Massachusetts, number 19, Gordon Ruddy. A junior from East Orange, New Jersey, number 23, Ron Bushwell. A senior from Brooklyn, New York, number 14, Ernie Braverman. A senior co-captain from Meriden, Connecticut, number 15, Stan Zyma. A senior co-captain from New London, Connecticut, number 25, Art Quimby.
We'll be talking to Art at halftime of today's game.
Team manager in 1954-55, a junior from West Hartford, Connecticut, Ron Badstubner.
This is a good team, too, Wayne. They went 20-5 in that first season here.
The assistant coach in 1954-55 and later director of athletics at Brandeis University, Nick Rodas. And our first lady of Connecticut basketball, wife of our beloved head coach of the 1954-55 team, the late Hugh Greer. Ladies and gentlemen, Billy Greer.
We'll try to have her on at halftime tonight, too. Billy's being held on in court by D. Rowe.
54-55 squad with a memento of tonight's final game in the Fieldhouse. Our coaches and players from our current 1989-90 nationally ranked University of Connecticut Huskies.
Billy Greer is 84 years old, and she says that she almost never misses a game here. I mean, up until these days.
And I want to tell you, I've watched UConn basketball for many years. This is exciting here tonight, looking at this 1954-55 team. Almost to a man, they're all here tonight, looking very dapper, especially the captain, Art Quimby. He will be one of the guys we'll talk to at halftime of our UConn Central Connecticut game tonight. Honored that first team that played here in the Fieldhouse, 1954 and 55. We'll be talking to Art Quimby, the captain of that team, and also to the wife of Coach Hugh Greer, Billy Greer. First off, Art Quimby, who played from 52 to 55, the career rebounding leader at UConn with 1,1716. He's now the superintendent of Connecticut Vocational Technical Schools. He, of course, was the co-captain of that team here at the University of Connecticut. One of those people who was honored before the game began tonight. All right, when you look back 36 years ago, what memories do you have of this building?
Remember the first time we came in it, we thought we were in Madison Square Garden. We thought we had arrived in a big time. and it seems like almost yesterday. It really does. All good times.
Were the crowds as noisy then as they become now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was the sixth man. We beat a lot of clubs over time, and I think because of the crowds, there's no question about it.
How often do you come back here now?
I get up maybe once a year, and I watch the games on TV, and I read.
And listen on the radio.
And listen on the radio. Oh, yeah. Any game that's on, I don't miss.
If you look back at a highlight of your career, what would it be?
Oh, I guess beating the Cross when they had the great team in our junior year and playing against some of the great players, Tom Gola, Tommy Heinsohn, people like that. And playing with these guys. I mean, they're just super.
Before you played here, you played next door at the ROTC hangar.
Played in the old cage, right.
Art Quimby played from 1952 to 1955 for Hugh Greer here at the University of Connecticut. Halftime in Stores with the score 47-33 Connecticut.